Ba 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 da. Hip in the lip. Ba 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 from unknown parts of metropolitan New York City. I am the hip, and this is the lip.
Yes, hello again, all of you hitting hipster, hip in the lip nation. Hello. It has been a while since we've been with you, but we're back.
We
And
haven't actually gone anywhere. It's been 2 months. We
but we're back.
we were recovering emotionally from the disappointing conclusion to the New York Islanders 2015-2016 season. And so here we are to pick up the pieces, see where this team is at. There have been some developments already. The team has changed. There's a lot of some old, long, some teams with some players with long tenure with the team who are gone. There's new faces. Players have resigned. We're going to catch up everyone in that regard. What is in store for the future for this team, both short term and the off season, and what we think about this team going forward. So it's going to be a good catch up show. Kind of start getting us psyched about next year. And what we also want to say here up front is that we plan to keep the show regular in the off season, and of course there's only so much you could talk about as far as the Islanders go on a weekly basis in July and August. So yes, you will hear about other New York sports in depth and beyond. So feel free to suggest particular topics of interest. You can find us on Twitter at Hip and the Lip, on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, Hip and the Lip. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Let's start with all right. So let's start with players who are no longer on this roster, who were last year, and I'll mention a few off the top so we get started there. Kyle Okposo, Franz Nielsen, Matt Martin. All right, bye.
All right, bye, and all right, next.
3 big names. Anybody that watches this team who log a lot of minutes for this team, and so they're gone. So let's get into Kyle Okposo first. So the Lip, tell us where he went, what happened, what your thoughts are. All right.
All right, next. Well, it is all right, goodbye, and all right, next for the 3 that you just mentioned. And yeah, I guess it's only, well, you know what? So we'll start with the Poso, and we're going to talk about him and Franz Nielsen and Martin too. But Okposo, just looking back at his career with the Islanders, now he was a first-round pick of Neil Smith. Now, Neil Smith was GM for about, I think, 10 or 15 minutes back in 2006. He was hired by Charles Wang, who is no longer majority owner. Of course, we'll get into that later. But he was hired by Charles Wang, and Neil Smith, who was the former GM of the New York Rangers, won a cup with the Rangers, was brought in because he had experience and, appeared to be a solid choice to take over the job after Mike Milbury was fired. And one of the very few things that Neil Smith did for this team was draft Kyle Okposo. Now, that left quite an imprint on the team for a long time. I mean, for 9 years, Kyle Okposo was within the Islander organization, and he was, again, a first-round pick. I think he was 7th overall, so obviously had very high expectations for him. And really, when you look back at his career, I think you'll look back at his career with the Islanders, you'll look back at it mostly positively. What's interesting is he recently, just the other day, I think actually, wrote a little blurb, or I guess more than the blurb, on the Players Tribune, which is, of course, Derek Jeter's online publication for athletes to put whatever the hell is going through their minds and whatever. Anyway, so he put just a couple paragraph post on that website thanking Islander fans. And one of the things he talked about was his favorite moment as an Islander. Now, he said that his favorite moment or his favorite game was back in 2013 against the Penguins in the playoffs. It was Game 3, the first game at the Coliseum. the first playoff game at the Coliseum since 2007. So it had been quite a while since Islander fans had an opportunity to experience playoff hockey at the Coliseum. And he mentioned that game, and what's interesting is that before that game, and really before that playoff series, most Islander fans were ready to ship Kyle Okposo out of town because he was underwhelming. He was very much underwhelming his expectations. He did not look like he was developing into the power forward that we all hoped that he could be. You know, a very highly productive power forward and a first line winger. He just was not showing the capability of being that. And most Islander fans, including myself, were ready to ship him out of town. And that game was really, I mean, that series, but really that game was his coming out party in terms of establishing himself as a top winger, as a top first line winger in the NHL. He scored a goal in that game, a big goal in that game. The Islanders would end up losing that game 5-4 in overtime, but he was that whole series. He was brilliant. He was by far their best forward, but their best player. And so I thought it was just interesting that he referenced that game in his little post today. But really, after that, his career took off with the Islanders. He would go on to have a couple very good seasons, which included the 2013-14 season, which followed the 13 playoffs. And my opinion was probably his best season as a pro. He was by far their most consistent player that year. And really what I think one of the reasons that Garth Snow and company decided to part ways with Okposo, and I think this really the die was cast, and this was really the jettisoning of Kyle Okposo really began about a year ago. But in the 2014-15 season, I guess January 2015, he sustained an eye injury after scoring 4 goals in a game against Pittsburgh. Was really like coming on that year. This was, not this past season, the season before, and he sustained this freak eye injury where he sustained a detached retina. He was out for 2 months, could not do anything physical for a couple months, and really just never regained his footing the entire, that rest of the season after he came back. I mean, he was not productive offensively. Even in the playoffs against Washington, he was okay. He wasn't great. And then, fast forward to this season, he had a good year, not a great year this season, a good year. And in the playoffs, they win their round. He plays the most playoff games of his career. And I thought, again, he left you wanting. And again, I don't know if it was the injury. I don't know if anything else factored in, but I think when you look back at his career, he never really became that bull in the china shop, which was the phrase that was commonly used to describe his play. Never really became that power forward that Islander fans were expecting when he was drafted back in 2007. And while he had a good career with the Islanders, and it's going to be tough to see him in a Buffalo Sabre uniform this year because he had spent his entire career here and had some great moments with the team. I think a lot of people, while they may be disappointed that he left, will look back and reflect on his time with the Islanders as maybe unfulfilled potential. So my thoughts.
This always comes down to money. He signed a deal, 7 years, $42 million. So and I understand it may not have been 7 per year, but that is the average. And for a guy that gave you 64 points last year in a full season, the question is and clearly to Garth Snow, the answer was no. But the question is it worth that price? Unfulfilled potential or not? I mean, that's what, look, there's a lot of players with unfulfilled potentials on different ends of the spectrum, right?
I'm not suggesting that they should have, that it was the right move necessarily to let him go. I mean, apparently, like I said, this was, I think the die was cast on this a year ago. I mean, there was rumors that they were shopping him. I think Garth Snow had made the decision that unless he was going to come back for a pretty significant discount, he was not going to look to bring him back.
So I'm asking you, let's put Garth Snow aside and rumors shopping, or rumors of the player being shopped aside. Would you have signed Kyle Okposo to the deal that the Sabres gave him?
Well, one caveat to that also. Apparently, he asked for more
You
money.
can't just answer a
Well,
question.
apparently, it goes.
Apparently, whatever. Maybe okay, fine. But just
Well,
answer the question first, then give your explanation.
well, you're saying was he good value at 7 years?
Would you have signed Kyle Oposo for 7 years and $42 million to stay on the Islanders? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, now go into whatever you want to say.
Well, apparently he was not going to take that same contract from the Islanders. It's not like the Islanders just offered him less and that the Sabres offered him more. Apparently he asked Garth Snow for more money than what he ultimately got from the Sabres. So that's the caveat that I wanted to get in there. So it wasn't just as simple as, the Islanders said, we'll give you $5 million. The Sabres came in $6 million. Okay, I want more money. I'm going to go to the Sabres. It didn't work itself out that way, apparently. Again, this is this is speculation. But do I think it's good value for Oposo at $6 million a year? Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that his production level warrants a $6 million a year contract. I mean, you want to argue the term, 7 years. Is it too long? The Islanders gave out 7 years to Andrew Ladd, which, of course, we'll get to. But they're going to miss him. I mean, they will miss him. We'll see how everything works itself out. But, he was a productive player, and they're going to have to try and replace his production.
And by the way, if you want to read that article, which I did as well, theplayerstribune.com, or just Google Kyle Oposo, and it probably will come up in Google towards the top, but you'll find it there. Okay, so look, that's a big, 64 points is a big void to replace, no question. And we pile on top of that with a player who accumulated 52 points last year, about 10 less than Oposo, but still, player with over 50 points is doing something for your team, and that's Frans Nielsen, who's also gone, and he went to the Detroit Red Wings. So, what was your immediate reaction when you heard about this?
I didn't know how I'll be honest. Now there are some members of Islander Nation that are card-carrying members of the Frans Nielsen is the most underrated player in the NHL club. Now I was never a part of that club. I thought that Frans Nielsen. Now he is, I guess, just a little background on him. The remnant of the Mike Milbury era was drafted by Mike Milbury, I think in 2004, somewhere around there. So he was the final holdout of the Milbury era, and I mean he is a player that just gradually got better, improved, aspects of his game. Not a guy with, immense amount of talent. Oposo had a lot of talent. I mean, he was drafted in the first round. I think Nielsen was drafted in the third or fourth round or something like that. He wasn't a guy that, had oodles of talent, but he just developed his game. He learned the game, developed the reputation of being a very heady, cerebral player, smart player, knew how to, play in different situations, had a very high hockey IQ, a very good defensive player, and that's no surprise that he went to Detroit as they crave his type of player, that that brand of player. So no surprise that he went there. So the Islanders were negotiating with Frans Nielsen. Apparently they offered him a 7-year deal for about $5 million. He ended up taking, I think it was 6 on average for 32.5 million, something like that. So it took a little bit less money and less term to go to Detroit. And he basically said, I wanted, to just do something different. I want a different challenge. I forget what the exact quote was, but he said he wanted a different challenge, different coaches, whatever. Some people interpreted that as a shot at Jack Capuano and company. I don't think that's where he was going, but I mean, it's disappointing because you grew accustomed to seeing him there, and in an Islander uniform day in day out for the last 6 or 7 years. Whenever he came up with the team, I think it was in 08, he made his debut, or something like that. And just seeing him again in uniform, for the last better part of a decade, it's tough now to fathom the idea of him being in a different uniform next year, just like it was Oposo. And again, he was a valuable player. He did a lot of different things, played in different situations, was their best guy to carry the puck into the offensive zone on the power play. They're going to have to try and find a guy to replace him there. Maybe they found someone. We'll get into that. But he will also very much be missed.
Interesting. Frans Nielsen's 52 points last year would have been the most on the Red Wings last year. No player on the Red Wings last year
Really? Oh, that's
had
interesting.
had over 50 points.
Wow.
And this is not to go into the Red Wings, in depth, but look, if Pavel Datsyuk played a full season, he would have
Yeah, he
had
was.
more than
Yeah, yeah,
he played 66 games and had 49 points, so he would have topped it. But
yeah.
the other guys at the top of the list all played a full season.
Wow.
So like the other top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys in points. Interesting. I mean, the Red Wings hung around for a bit last year too. Despite the apparent deficiency in offense, and now Franz Nielsen has an opportunity to be and like you did with the Islanders, a top player on the team, and so it's another void. It's
Yeah.
too when you look at it that way, it's a lot of points that are missing from this team.
Yeah, played on the penalty kill, played on the power play, took, important defensive zone draws, became, again, another part of his game, face-offs, he just developed and became much better at.
And the team personality takes a hit with guys that have been with the team for so long. And
no question.
Came up through the Islander system. I mean,
yeah.
And so that brings us to the third big name who's no longer with this team, Matty Martz. I mean, talk about personality and just adding so much intangibles to this team. He's now with the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yes,
the guy
he is.
that the perennial hit leader, penalty minute accumulator, is gone. And so this is a guy who, hard to envision leaving New York with his longtime girlfriend, who's the daughter of a New York radio personality, former New York Jet quarterback. But he's gone, and you wish him the best. But now it feels like, when you're looking at who leaves, you feel like it's piling on. So, I think fans were kind of bracing for this one in part. I don't know if you were surprised or not, but
yeah, I mean, no, they pretty much made it clear all season that they were not negotiating with him. I'm sure that he made his contract demands known to the team early, on in the year. I'm assuming that they approached him, and he said he was probably looking for around $3 million a year or something like that. And they say, well, you're a fourth line player, you're limited offensively. You don't play the penalty kill. You don't play the power play. We can't give that kind of money to a guy just because he leads the league in hits every year. I mean, so it didn't come as a surprise to me at all. I mean, again, everybody's gonna miss him. He was a heart and soul type guy. He gave everything he had every shift. He was a guy that was absolutely a crowd favorite, had a lot of ties to the community. Of course, you mentioned dating Boomer's daughter, and but he was a guy that made up what was coined as the best fourth line in the NHL for the last couple of years, and he was a third of that. Whether or not you thought that he was, a deficiency on that line because of his possession stats or whatever, the bottom line is he was still a part of that line, and they, were a very consistent and very energetic line for the Islanders the last couple of years, along with Cal Clutterbuck and Casey Cizikas. And the Islanders just did not want to make that kind of financial commitment to him. And Maple Leafs were willing to give him $2.5 million a year. And again, we're a guy that you wish all the best to. We're going to miss him. They don't have anybody now in the lineup that would be willing to drop the gloves like he did, to stand up for teammates like he did. So. All like you mentioned, all the intangibles that he brought, sometimes it's tough to put a price on it, and sometimes it's tough to commit financially to things that you can't look at on paper, especially in a hard salary cap world like the NHL, exists in. But, you hear the cliche, it's part of the business, and for Matty Martin, he learned that, I guess maybe not the hard way because he got a contract, but still, it's going to be tough for Islander fans to see him in a different uniform next season.
The Islanders did retain one of the other players on that best fourth line in the NHL. However, yep. And you mentioned his name, Casey Cizikas, 5-year deal.
Yeah. So he was a restricted free agent, and I mean, this was actually announced. It's probably like a month and a half now since this was announced. Honestly, I'm baffled by it. Not that I didn't. I mean, he was not going to go anywhere. He was going to be on the team next year, but I don't know if it was really necessary to give him that much money. I really don't. I don't know what the
how much money. How much money was it?
16.75 million over 5 years.
Okay.
For a fourth line center, that's a lot.
3 and change.
Yeah. I was really shocked by it, actually. I wasn't surprised that he got a contract. I mean, you knew he was going to get a contract. It was just a question of how much. And I would have thought maybe like 5, like for maybe like between like 10 to 12 or something like that. I don't know we'll get into projections for next season as we go along in the offseason. I don't know if they look at him as being a fourth line center next year, or if they look to move him up within the lineup, on the depth chart. But it's a lot of money to commit to a fourth line center.
So I'm just trying to see, the NHL salary cap is how much?
Well, they put the escalator in. It's 70. 70s. It's low 70s.
All right. Yeah, it looks. I see it here.
I think it's 73 million.
And so you have how many players typically on a team that are signed under contract? We're just trying to do some quick math here. I guess where I'm getting at is how much is the average player making on your team?
I mean, the average player is probably going to make somewhere.
I mean, what is the average salary per player? So
I would say between like maybe like around 2 million, 2 to 2.5 million.
Okay,
something like that.
So, yep. Okay. So he's signed for a little above average, and of course, there's players that are much above it and below it. But just to give a gauge, I mean, that's we need a reference point. So
I think it's about 2.5 million, something like that.
Okay. All right.
If I had to guess. All right.
So you retain him. I mean, so look, these are the 3 guys that are gone. I mean, if you asked, after Tavares, if you asked for like who are the if you had a 4 faces of the New York Islanders, and obviously Tavares after him, who are they?
Well, your best forward is still on the team. That's Tavares. Your 2 and 3 forwards are gone. Yeah.
Right.
So
if you had a Mount Rushmore of the New York Islanders, current players, well, I guess for 2015-16. Would it be Tavares, Oposo, Nielsen, and Martin? I don't know. Martin, I don't know, because
would you go visit that Mount Rushmore? Would you go take a trip to go visit that Mount Rushmore of Franz Nielsen?
If it were in a craft beer bar somewhere, I'd probably be inclined to, because then I could enjoy my unknown beers and just stare at their faces. So look, I mean. Now, players that they also retained or they extended deals on, Ryan Strome.
He was given a qualifying offer. There's still no contract yet for him.
Okay, and Shane Prince, they did re-sign.
They did. 2 years, $850,000.
So a year per year or total?
2 years, $850 a year.
Okay. That was the big player that the Islanders traded for the trade.
Prince of Brooklyn, he's still here. Yeah. I mean, they couldn't lose the.
And if I understand correctly, Brian Straight is no longer on the team.
That is correct. Brian Straight is gone. I believe he is now in Winnipeg. Yeah, wow. So Brian Straight, one of my favorite whipping boys from last season, as our listeners very well know. And a favorite whipping boy of Islander fans in general, but Brian Straight is, I'll miss him. A guy, is for all of his limitations and all of his shortcomings, they give an honest effort. He's a guy to root for. They liked him in the locker room, as we talked about on previous shows. But yep, he's gone. Brian Straight, no longer a depth defenseman on the New York Islanders.
Now, a player that you might say does not give his best effort. A player that is still on this team.
Where could you possibly be going?
A player who is he the longest tenured player on this team?
He is now. Yes, he is. Wait, you mean Alan Quine, right? Oh, wait, no, Alan Quine's not the longest tenured player, right? No, he's not the longest tenured player.
Scott Mayfield.
Oh, Scott, of course, Scott Mayfield. How can I forget? You can only mean one person, but just confirm it for me. I don't want to, I don't want to jump ahead just in case you're referring to somebody else.
He has the same initials as Jack Bauer.
Does his last name rhyme with Faley?
So he's back, and is the longest.
Does it also rhyme with
on the
ukulele? I think that'd be a good profession for him. You should take up the ukulele. Anyway,
look, we don't need to get into it. Listen to previous episodes to hear about the Lips analysis of Josh Bailey's NHL skill set and translation of that on the ice. Right, but just making a point here. I think when you think about but maybe I'm going to hold off on this point. Before we go to that, let's talk about who they've now acquired, because they've made some moves. So let's we talked about who they didn't re-sign and who they did. Now, who are the new faces on this team? So introduce to us the impact players that are now New York Islanders.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, just thinking about what the team is going to look like next year, and they still have plenty of time left in this offseason to make more moves, but we already know that it's going to look very different next year. The whole dynamic of the team is going to change. Well, we'll get into all that, just assessing everything. But yeah, so 3 new faces on the team. At 12:01 p.m., I guess, on July 1st, the Islanders actually did something that they haven't done probably ever in their history, which was sign one of the top free agents on the market. And they did that in signing Andrew Ladd. So Andrew Ladd, welcome to the New York Islanders. A player that's been in the league for, I think, 10 years. And, and he's been on a couple of different teams. He's won a couple cups with 2 different teams. He's won 2 cups with 2 different teams, one with Chicago, one with Carolina. I believe in his rookie season, that's when he won one with Carolina. So he signs a 7-year, $38.5 million contract, very heavily front-loaded, just like Kyle Oposo's was. And welcome aboard, Andrew Ladd, and let's hope that you live up to that contract.
Tell us about Andrew Ladd. So do you think the intention is for him to replace Kyle Oposo's offense primarily? Yeah,
I mean, he's the quote unquote replacement for him. He's not as good an offensive player as Kyle Oposo, so I want to get that out front. I think he's capable of in his best year, he's capable of between 50 and 60 points. Maybe you can get 25 to 30 goals on his best year out of him. But he does have some mileage on him. Again, he's been in the league for 10 years. He's, 30, 31 years old, something like that.
30 years old.
30 years old. All right. So, but he's been in the league for a while now, so he does have a lot of mileage on him. 7 years, I heard that and I was like, I'm not a fan of the term. The $5.5 million a year I thought was fine. I thought that was, you were hoping that they'd be able to get him for something like that and not, really overpay for him. So that I don't have a problem with the money. The term, we'll see. But he's a big forward. He has he's pretty good around the net. He's got a pretty good scoring touch around the net. He's good in the corners and along the wall. He plays a harder game than Oposo. Again, not as creative offensively, but he's he's more of a north-south, straight-ahead type player. I think he can play. I think he could be a good complement to Tavares. He could be a guy almost like Molson in a way. If Islander fans remember Matt Molson, who would set himself up in front of the net. Ladd could do other things. He's not as limited as Molson was, but I think he could be a good complement to Tavares. I'm sure that he will be starting off the season with Tavares. I would be shocked if he's not. So look for that come October 13th, 14th, whenever the hell the Islanders begin their season. But he brings leadership. Again, 1-2 cups. Good in the locker room, apparently. He has a really good reputation around the league. And, they're going to hope that he fills that void that Kyle Oposo left with his departure. So I guess we'll have to wait and see and hope that it works out. Yeah, right.
Well, look, after Steven Stamkos, who was correct me if I'm wrong, was the most? I mean, no, he retained. He went back to Tampa Bay, but he would have been the biggest free agent.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he would have been. So after
every team would have called him in that period after.
So
all
right. So after him, though, players who actually went to free agency was Andrew Ladd, a top 5 free agent.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at every free agent list, actually, Poso was probably number 1 on a few of those lists, but Andrew Ladd was also top 5, I would say, on most lists that you would look at least forwards.
So, I mean, at least in that regard, look, Oposo left, but give the Islanders credit for signing a top free agent. I mean, let's
give Garth credit.
I don't know. I mean, at least they did something significant immediately, right? I mean,
yeah, no, they did. I mean, it was tweeted out the day before free agency began that he was on Long Island, that the Islanders had him and his wife on Long Island. He was staying at the Marriott. Maybe he ate at that quaint little place called Buffalo Wild Wings on Merrick Avenue, or maybe they took him for some good authentic Italian. Borelli's is right down the street, right? So, but he looked like he was going to be signing with the team. It was just, he stayed the night, and it was basically reported that it was a done deal, that he was going to be signing with the team as soon as free agency got underway, and they announced it pretty much as soon as the free agency signings began. And yeah, Garth knew he had to sign one of those big free agents, whether it was him or Louis Eriksson or whoever, and he made sure that he got his man. He targeted Ladd, he got his man, so kudos to Garth for that.
He knew he had to for the sake of the team or for the sake of his job?
Both.
Okay, well, look, as long as it's for the sake of the team, fine. All right. So next new Islander.
Which one? There's a couple.
Well, all right. I will spoon feed you one then. Jason Chimera, welcome to the New York Islanders.
Well, he did sign later on that day. Surprisingly, this one came out of nowhere, at least for me. I don't remember it being reported on at all. Jason Chimera, the former Washington Capital, who I like to dislike during his time with the Capitals, replacement for Matt Martin. Ladd is the quote-unquote replacement for Oposo. That means Chimera is the quote-unquote replacement for Matt Martin. Can play on the fourth line, but will bring you more offense than Matt Martin did. Won't drop the gloves like Matt Martin, but he's a good skater. He plays a hard game. He's good on the forecheck. I think he lacks a little bit in the possession numbers. So those that are married to advanced stats and possession numbers are not going to like Jason Chimera, but he is a very good skater. He can contribute offensively. He's old. He's 37 years old. I actually don't even realize he's been in the league that long, but he's up there in age, but he still has proven that he can still play at a pretty good level for what he does, what he brings, and the amount of minutes he's going to get. And you hope that he can replicate the season that he had with Washington last year. I mean, he scored 20 goals last year. He had 40 points, something like that. And if he can do that again, he will be a very good signing, because Matt Martin was not going to approach that type of production. And you got him for a pretty decent deal, $2.25 million. I mean, it wasn't great value, but it's decent enough. And we'll see if what situations they're gonna play him in. He's played on the power play. I don't think he plays on the penalty kill. He's not to my knowledge, but he can play on the power play. We'll see what they plan to do with him. But it's tough to say it was a bad signing.
So how do you compare him to a guy like Cal Clutterbuck? I mean, Cal Clutterbuck, is younger and obviously is a better offensive player, but, skating well and hard on the forecheck, isn't that, is he a similar player to Cal Clutterbuck, just older and maybe less offensive punch at this point?
Yeah, that's a good comparison. You could definitely compare his game to Clutterbuck. I think Clutterbuck has a better shot than Chimera, as we saw last year. But I think Chimera he definitely plays a similar game to Clutterbuck, and if they do play him with Cizikas and Clutterbuck, which I would imagine at least at the beginning of the season they will, there's speculation as to, are they going to move? But I would think that they're going to play him with those two, and they're going to play a very similar game that they play with Martin. They're probably not really going to miss much of a step without Martin there. I think Chimera can fill in for Martin again in a manner that is conducive to the style that those two play. And yeah, he plays a similar game to Clutterbuck, and he throws the body around. He will accumulate hits, not as much as Martin, but he will accumulate hits, but it's not always just accumulating, empty hits. It's about, having those hits, have significance and impact within the context of the game. And I think Chimera does that very well.
All
and
right.
I think as long as he limits the shots against, which apparently is one of his shortcomings, he could be a productive player for the Islanders and gel with those two players as well. And I would imagine that they'll be grouped together.
So this was a pleasant surprise to you.
It was definitely a surprise. I was not expecting this. Ladd, I mean, we knew was coming. I was not expecting Chimera. It's not a bad signing. I'm not going to say it's a bad signing. Is it a great signing? We'll see. I mean, you hope that he doesn't just all of a sudden turn 38 or turn into an ancient player next year, and that his play belies his age, and that he has a similar year in terms of production that he had with Washington last year. And if he does, then it's a good signing.
Okay, we'll see. All right. And the third new face on this team, P.A. Parenteau.
A familiar face before the hipster days of watching the Islanders.
Indeed.
The Pierre-Alexandre Parenteau. 1-year deal, $1.25 million. Played a couple of years with the Islanders, was actually attached to John Tavares' wing earlier in his career. And this, I'm not surprised, couple of reasons. Number one, there was actually speculation that they were looking to trade for him at the trade deadline. They didn't because Toronto wanted too much or whatever. Number two, he's a right winger. They desperately needed to bring a right winger in here. Number three, he's obviously familiar with Tavares and the team. Number four, and this is what I think Garth definitely had at the forefront of his mind. All the other stuff was important too, but I think what he also had at the forefront of his mind was that he can actually do some of the things that Frans Nielsen did, and that they're losing with Nielsen gone. He is, I mentioned before, Nielsen is very good at gaining the zone, the offensive zone on the power play. Parenteau is actually very good at that as well. He has good vision and he's a good playmaker. Also, like Nielsen, sets himself up along the wall. Now, and Nielsen, they would put him on the point. They would put him along the wall. He is actually very good along the wall in the power play. I can guarantee you that you will see him there at the beginning of the season, and that he'll just basically slip into Nielsen's spot, and he can definitely contribute on the power play. I think that this was actually, you can argue that this was their best value signing over the other two, just because of what he brings, because of the money, because of his familiarity with the team and with their best player. And their best player, I'm sure, signed off on this. I'm sure they came to him and said, "Hey, John, what do you think of bringing back PA?" I'm sure he gave him the thumbs up. So this actually, I would say, is on the surface a good move.
33 years old.
Yep.
I believe he wasn't traded because he was injured. I think that there was that to him as well. I think I read that before.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah.
So, I understand he is somewhat of an injury risk, but you know what? At that price for 1 year, with the upside there,
yeah,
I see your point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely high ceiling, high floor. I would say high floor. You really don't have much risk there. It's a very low risk signing.
We talked about 3 guys that left, 3 guys that have returned, and we make it seem straightforward, and then this player X gun is replaced by player Y, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, it's not that straightfut.
The Islanders try to make it as straightforward as possible in terms of X replaces Y.
Well, that all being said, though, it's not. It's obviously doesn't work that way completely. But when you look at you look at this team now on paper, and obviously there's a lot of gelling that will have to occur. And I mean, last year the team was so Jekyll and Hyde anyway that they were gelling for games, and there were games they were winning they shouldn't have, and they had stretches where they looked amazing, but they were, short-lived. I don't see it necessarily as a huge step back as far as, well, we're losing 3 guys with combined who knows how many years those 3 players had with this team, with these 3 new faces, because they didn't seem like a incredibly well gelled team last year anyway. So, they were so up and down.
I agree. I think that factors in. I think I think while Garth would have liked to have brought back Franz, I think he looked at this also that they needed a new identity. I think he looked at they just kind of got complacent. I mean, these guys knew each other obviously very well. I mean, a lot of these guys have been playing together for a while now, and maybe they reached their ceiling. Maybe this past season was the second round, game 5 of the second round was this group's ceiling, and he just felt they had to change, shake things up, change the dynamic in that locker room. But to your point, and I think, maybe I cut you off, and you were going to make this point. Do they look worse on paper than last year? I mean, it's debatable whether or not they're as good right now as they were at the end of the season. In May when the season ended. But the question is, are they better? And there is really no argument that you can make to me that would have any kind of substance that would say that they're better. Just because the goal of this offseason, yeah, you knew you were going to have guys potentially leaving and that you were going to have to replace those guys. But if you consider yourself to be a Stanley Cup contender, you saw that team last year was not good enough to win a Stanley Cup. And if the goal is to make the team better, they still have work to do. Garth Snow still has work to do. He is not done. And if he thinks he's done, he will not have a job this time next year. I can tell you that right now.
Well, expand on that. I mean, what work should be done? If you're the general manager right now, you got these 3 guys. We're excited. You made some moves, and you're saying he's not done. So what should he be doing?
Well, there's been so much talk about bringing in a high talent winger for John Tavares, a dynamic, game-breaking type winger for Tavares. Now, you can debate whether or not he has to have that. I mean, if you put a line together right now of him, Parenteau, and Ladd, could that trio have success? Absolutely, no question. Especially when you have a guy like Tavares anchoring the line. Now, Taylor Hall, who a lot of Islander fans would have loved to have obtained. He was traded from Edmonton to the New Jersey Devils a couple weeks ago, actually right before free agency began, for what appeared to be on the surface a very underwhelming return in Adam Larson. A guy who at best appears to be a second pairing defenseman. And Taylor Hall would have looked terrific next to John Tavares. I mean, a guy that, maybe could have scored 40 goals playing with John Tavares. And the speculation was that Edmonton and the Islanders were talking, and that Edmonton had asked the Islanders, Garth Snow specifically, for Travis Hamonic. Now, there was an article written by Arthur Staple about a week ago, kind of just giving this, State of the Union type, address as to where the team is after free agency and what they're going to look to do. And he addressed the speculation surrounding Taylor Hall. And whether or not Travis Hamonic was potentially a chip that was going to be used to trade for Hall. And he pretty much confirmed that he was, and that if they wanted to do a 1-for-1 deal, Hall for Hamonic, that Peter Chiarelli, the GM of the Edmonton Oilers, was going to be willing to do that. But basically said that Garth Snow did not want to, after everything that went down with Travis Hamonic last season, and the trade request being announced, and then rescinding the trade request. After all of that, he just didn't want to turn around and then deal him off to Edmonton. Just the way that the season ended, and the way the whole season unfolded after the trade request came out, and upset the dynamic in the locker room. And whether or not you agree with the move, I understand why Garth didn't want to trade Hamonic. I think on the surface, in terms of a hockey trade, I think it was definitely the right move to make, just from a hockey perspective. But when you take the person into account, I understand why Garth Snow did not make the deal, and it definitely makes sense to me as to why he didn't want to trade Travis Hamonic. So that was an option. I think he would have been a great fit on the team. Unfortunately, it didn't come to fruition. So now I think that Garth Snow has to look to potentially bring in another, whether it's a winger or a centerman, he has to bring in another top offensive, or at least attempt to try and bring in a top offensive player, or make some kind of move for an offensive player. Because right now, this team, the way that they're constructed, to me, this is basically a mishmash of players that you hope you throw together and that they come together. And you're basically going on a prayer that this team will gel and that they'll exceed expectations that were exceed what they did last season. And right now, I just don't see it.
So there's no top, right winger or centerman that you could just go sign, presumably.
No, free agency, I think they're done free agent-wise. This is going to have to come via trade. And you know what? They have trade chips. And now is the time for Garth Snow to demonstrate that he actually has the balls to go out and shake up the team a little bit, whether it's trading a top prospect like Matthew Barzal or who, you've heard the word untouchable attached to him, which I have no idea why. He's a prospect that is not by any stretch a guarantee to succeed in this league and be a great player in this league. So I think that if that player is available, and I think that player is absolutely available. Who it is, I don't know. There's been rumors about Matt Duchene in Colorado. There's still rumors about Edmonton. There's still rumors about Montreal, potentially Pacioretty. So I'm sure that player, if Garth Snow is willing to pony up, that player can be had. Now, you also have to factor in the salary cap. And you asked about Josh Bailey before, and you talk about a contract right now that would be absolutely great to get out of here. So you actually have the room to go out and bring in a guy making some money. That would be the guy to get out of here.
Well, how much is he making?
I think he still has another couple of years. He's making at least like 3.5 a year, I would say.
So more than what the average salary would be.
That's correct.
Poor. Yeah, well, that's a tough one.
And I honestly don't know. I really don't know what Garth's plan is. But his off season right now is incomplete. This cannot be it, because if it is, this team is not winning anything next year. I can. So
you're asking for a big trade. I mean, that's what you're saying.
I'm saying. Yes, because that guy is not out there in free agency. The free agency, they're done. There's nobody out there.
I mean, and so there are teams out there right now that are willing to part in the offseason with top offensive players. I mean, are teams already thinking for the future that they're willing to get rid of a guy with 1 year left on their deal before the season even starts?
Well, it depends on what the team needs. Colorado wants a defenseman, that we know. Would they be willing to trade Duchene? Apparently they would be. Gabriel Landeskog, another player on Colorado, his name has also come up in rumors. We saw PK Subban and Taylor Hall traded. I mean, Taylor Hall is considered one of the top 5 left wingers in the NHL. He was traded. PK Subban is one of the best players in the league. And if we want to get into that trade for a couple minutes, we can. I mean, that one just blew me away. And that's a trade that sends shockwaves through the league. But I mean, top players in the NHL are traded. And I'm sure that that guy is out there. If Garth Snow is willing to pony up, the chips, whether it's, prospects or whatever, off the current team, they may have, if a team's looking for a defenseman, they may have to trade Ryan Pulock, which I'd be really, really hesitant to do. But if you're bringing back a top offensive player, you have to consider it. I think Calvin DeHaan is a guy that you would look to trade if, depending on what the other team values him at. It wouldn't be easy to replace him, but he's definitely easier to replace than a guy like Pulock. But they have the chips, they have the players to go out and make that type of deal. It's just the question is, does Garth Snow have the balls?
Does he have the balls? Okay, and thinking of his track record with the Islanders, what's the most significant player that he's acquired via trade during his tenure as the Islanders general manager?
Well, that must be Shane Prince. Via trade?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. What's the ballsiest trade he's made?
Well, the ballsiest trade that he's made, I would say, is Ryan Smith, and that was in his first 10 minutes on the job, and he has not demonstrated that kind of gumption since that trade was made, and this was 10 years ago now. He traded He traded a first-round pick and 2 former first-round picks for Ryan Smith, the guy that was a free agent, because he said, "I want to go for it. I'm bringing in Ryan Smith," and you have not seen that type of cavalier attitude or that approach from him since then. And that's what scares you as an Islander fan, because I don't know if he has it in him to go out and really upset the apple cart and trade 1 or 2 of their top prospects for an established, legit top forward in this league. But I can say with certainty that guy is out there to be had if he's willing to do it.
he's waiting. It's like he's waiting. He's over patient. He wants to do it when he feels strongly enough that this team can actually win a Stanley Cup. And I guess he thinks that it's not there yet. The problem is, are they going to go off a cliff and go? Are they going to regress as a team instead of progress, and that will ultimately cost him his job. So it's a fine line that he's playing with right now, it seems like to me.
I agree. He is walking a tightrope. And,
all right. Well,
yeah,
and so it'll be not Mr. Charles Wang that will be issuing him the pink slip, but some other folks. So that is officially been that changes as of July 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, it's done. Ding dong. The Wong is no longer majority owner. Yep, Ledecky and Malkin are in. They are now the ones making the decisions. Charles Wang is merely a footnote, as he still retains ownership. Unfortunately, I wish he would just go away completely and just go away forever. Unfortunately, he will still retain minority ownership of the team, but he is no longer making any type of decisions. His word doesn't mean jack anymore, so he can say whatever he wants, and Ledecky and Malkins can say, yeah, get the hell out of here. We are the ones now in control. We are the ones making the decisions. No surprise that they didn't make any change with the GM or coach. They didn't want to come in and make that change on July 1st. That would have made no sense. So I'm sure that they are well aware, Jack and Garth, that this year is a referendum for them, and they know that if they don't produce results this year, that they most likely will be out of jobs come this time next year.
Yeah, this is all setting up to be a very interesting year for the New York Islanders. Look, we haven't talked hockey really in 2 months, at least not on this show, and just going through the change of this team, it's really leaving a lot of interesting questions. They did acquire players with skills. They lost players with skills, with personality, with tenure. So you're left wondering, after John Tavares, who's going to fill in the three silhouettes in the Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, so they had to chisel away. So I guess it's just a simple process. They just have to chisel the the jawbone and the cheekbone of the departed Oposo, Franz, and Matty Martz.
I mean, who really are after John Tavares? Because outside of Barclays Center, I know at least for the Nets, they have four illustrations of the four most popular players. I don't know if it's four, maybe it's three, whatever. And I'm thinking if they do something similar for the Islanders this upcoming season, after John Tavares, who are they putting up there? Thomas Greiss?
The Greiss? I like put the Greiss up there. He's still on the team, right? That's another interesting question. What are they going to do with the goalies? They still have the three-headed goalie monster, and that cannot remain into the season. So I know that they're definitely trying to trade Halak. Yeah, the Halak is definitely out there. So we'll see what he does there. After Tavares, Travis Hamonic, the piece of the franchise. Yeah. He's been there now for, he's probably up there in terms of tenure. Josh Bailey, I just hope he's out by the time the season starts. Their longest tenured player. Please get him out of here. He has no place on this team anymore. It's just time to cut ties with him. And I will destroy Garth Snow if opening day comes and he is still on the team. I am telling you right now, listeners, get ready. If he is on the team, I will destroy Garth Snow.
What do you want him to do? Just cut him and eat the cap space?
Trade him for a fifth round, for a D-level prospect. Trade him for a fifth-round pick. Trade him for a bag of pucks. It doesn't matter. Get him out.
Okay. All right.
Bring back a bag of autographed Gordon Bombay hockey pucks. Done.
All right. Well, I think it's worth noting that the NHL is going to play games in Las Vegas.
How about that?
Now, when does this start?
So it'll start after this coming season. So it'll be for the 2017-18 season. Yeah.
Okay. And it will be an expansion team.
Yes. Which means there will be an expansion draft.
Wow.
And that means that the Islanders may lose a key player in that expansion draft.
How does that work? How does the expansion draft work?
I don't know all the specifics. I know that they can protect a certain amount of players, and then they have to expose, anybody that they don't protect or that would not be required to be exposed. So like rookies, and I think like if you're a rookie or in your second year in your professional contract, your entry level contract, then you don't have to be exposed. So either you're one of those, you're protected, and you only have a certain amount that you can protect, and then everybody else gets exposed.
Wow, interesting.
So they may lose nobody. I mean, Vegas may say we don't want anybody from the Islanders. We want players from other teams, so they may lose nobody. But on the other hand, they actually just hired George McPhee as their GM. George McPhee is the now former special advisor to Charles Wang and Garth Snow and Company. And he's a former GM of the Capitals. So he is very familiar with the Islanders, including their young players. That may be
so as far as the expansion draft goes, he's not doing any research on the Islanders because he knows it inside out.
Oh, I'm sure he has to do zero research on the Islanders.
So he'll just do what he has to do on the other.
Yeah, maybe he'll have like a spoken handshake agreement with Garth Snow, hey, I won't take this player, and I don't know.
All right, well, look, a lot of interesting developments to say the least. I mean, you know what though? If you told me that the Islanders re-signed Okposo, Nielsen, and Martin, and they didn't get these other guys, I'd be kind of like, I know that you're saying you don't think, at least on paper, the current construct of players roster. That being said, I like this injection of, look, they sign a guy at one of the top coveted free agents, and then a couple of quote unquote replacement players for guys that left. Not replacement level, but substitutes for guys that are gone. This team, it felt like it last year. They just weren't good enough. I mean, they were eliminated probably where they should have been, if not.
They were lucky to be in the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't be if they had these three guys that left again, and they signed a couple of role players, I'd be thinking, what's going to happen this year that was any different from last year, other than you hope that they just play a little bit better. But I think it just went on for too long, and good. It's a good shakeup, and it's getting me kind of excited. But yes, I see your point that Garth, maybe it's time to just have some balls and try to save your job, because you're otherwise taking a pretty big risk here that they're just not going to gel and it's not going to work out. So you really need a big name.
I mean, if there was ever a time, yeah, and you never improve your team by going out and signing free agents. I mean, free agency is meant to fill in some gaps, supplement your big players, and sometimes they do have their big player in John Tavares, but there's something that's still missing from this team, and that's why I am very much a proponent of Garth going out, evaluating the trade marketing, and seeing what he can do to bring in another big-time offensive player that could really elevate this team to a point where they may be a legitimate Stanley Cup contender next year. Because if he's able to bring in, let's say, Matthew Duchene, I'm just going to throw his name out there, Matt Duchene, let's say they bring him in, you put him in as your second-line center. All of a sudden now, of course, they may have to trade, a Brock Nelson or and a couple prospects in there. So you will be trading somebody from your current roster, but you go out and you make a move for a player like that. Now all of a sudden you have two good scoring lines that you can put out there. And in my opinion, you turn yourself into a team that can compete with the best teams in your conference. And I don't think the Islanders were good enough to play with the Pittsburghs or the Washingtons last year, or the Tampa Bays, obviously. And that's why it is so imperative that he goes out and makes that type of move before the season.
Well, we'll see. We'll follow it. We'll, we're planning to give you the updates weekly. They probably won't be very long updates at this point in the season, but we're not just hockey fans. We're sports fans, and there's we're in the middle of baseball season. We're not going to get into it tonight, but next time expect to hear some baseball talk. Plenty to talk about for the New York sports teams, as there's a trade deadline coming up there in a few weeks, and the teams have some decisions to make. And the NFL is not too far away, actually, for the 16-17 season. So less than 2 months, I think, before opening kickoff. So get to talk about all my fantasy football sleepers that I'll reveal before the auction, and still dominate the league. So looking forward to that.
All right.
So here's a new little twist. So within these last 2 months, in fact, I have taken a strong interest in let's say, being a beer enthusiast. Okay, so I've always enjoyed drinking beer since I started, probably as too young of an age. Nevertheless, to me, it was not something that I would be researching heavily. I would just go, and I'd kind of like wheat beer, so I'd be the Blue Moon or the Hefeweizen guy, and just but I have to give credit to my brother, who started kind of showing me this world of craft beer and how crazy people can get waiting hours in line to get these can releases at these breweries. And to me, it's very overwhelming. There's endless, to me, it seems like there's endless types of beer. There's endless breweries brewing them and selling them in different ways, through growlers and bottles and cans and collaborations, breweries getting together and sleeping together and making beer. I mean, that being said, so I've been trying these different kinds of beers, and so I've discovered there's some kinds of beers out there that I really like that I never really drank before in my life. In particular, sour beer, and we'll get into this in more detail, plenty to talk about here. Sour beer, Gose beer, and Berliner Weiss beer. In particular, those three types, and you could look them up, are really favorable to me. And they're not for everyone, but what I'm going to start doing is recommending a beer to try. So, again, these are not for everyone, but you know what? You don't know until you give it a shot. So for this episode, I am recommending a Gose beer, Gose. But it's pronounced Gose, and it's basically a wheat beer that has salt and coriander in it. And sometimes there's fruity tardiness incorporated. And so this particular Gose, one of the first Goses I had, still a favorite. It's a very unique taste. It's called Belly Flop. It's from the Manayunk Brewing Company, Manayunk. They're based in Philadelphia. And what's interesting about this beer is that the flavors are cucumber and melon, and it's salty. It's light. Gose beer are light and refreshing. It's 4 to 5%. It's the opposite of hoppy. But you know what? I had it. I'm like, wow, I've never had a beer anywhere like this, and it was refreshing. So if you think you could tolerate that, I highly recommend it. And feel free to let me know on Facebook or on Twitter if you really think it sucked. Because you wouldn't be the first to say it, and that's what makes beer fun, though. I'm okay with, I think that's what keeps it interesting, is people have different preferences and styles. And so hopefully we have some beer drinkers out there. Otherwise, this was a waste of 5 minutes. But I'm going to continue doing it anyway, because you can only say so much about Gose beer to your wife before she wants. So I'll say it here, and that is the beer of the week.
You mean the hipster beer of the week?
The hipster beer of the week, Belly Flop.
And it sounds pretty H, so I cannot wait to try it myself.
And the picture of it is, it's a green can. I don't know if I can actually show this on YouTube because of copyright concerns. So I'll just look at it and describe the can. You can look at it and Google yourself. It's a green can, and it does in fact have a picture of a cucumber between the words belly and flop. So people, I've seen pictures of people bringing this on the beach. This visually does not look like it belongs on the beach. Picture a lime green can on a beach. Doesn't really. You think of beach, you think of blue, blue water, blue sky, sand. You're not thinking of bright green. Well, that's this can, and that's what the beer kind of tastes like. So
that's what makes the beer age.
All right. Well, good episode. Good to be back after a brief recovery period there. And so
we had to wait for our emotional wounds to heal. Although I think I had some sparring. All right. Next.
All right. We'll see you next week. All right. Bye. All right. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.